Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by River, the place that I personally go to securely invest in Bitcoin with confidence and with zero fees.
There's around 4 or 5 entities in the world that are deciding what goes in the blockchain. That's centralized. And whether or not the ramifications of that have reared their ugly head yet is kind of irrelevant. We don't really want to wait for that to become the problem that it could be before we fix it. Because if it starts becoming a problem and then we try to fix it, we're going to meet a lot more resistance than if we take a prophylactic attitude.
Where I want to start off is, Mechanic, you and I had a really good discussion about block templates, why it's important for miners to be able to have block templates, basically get control of the block template, because right now it's very centralized at the mining pools. Can you give us just a 3 to 5 minute overview for people that might not have heard that conversation? We're going to have a link in the show notes to that entire conversation if people want to really kind of go deep on the idea, but give us like a 3 or 5 minute version to catch them up on why this conversation we're having is important.
Right. So my overall summary on it is Bitcoin needs to be decentralized. And it's one of the characteristics Bitcoin has that makes us not only work as we should work, but also it's the thing that separates us from the plethora of coins out there, right? But interestingly, I'm going to try and knock off on too many tangents here, but Bitcoin was fairly centralized at the beginning and it became more decentralized as time went on. And it's been trending generally in the right direction, but there are many aspects to Bitcoin. Some aspects became much more centralized and some became much more decentralized. And we need to tackle those when they happen because people like centralization because it's really efficient and it's really cheap. There's always an inherent cost to decentralization because you have to do a lot more work yourself. There's some, time that you have to spend learning how to tie your own shoelaces, so to speak. That's just how it is. So one part of the ecosystem in Bitcoin that became really centralized is block template construction. Now, if you go, I have no idea what that is. It's simply whoever creates a block template is someone that's deciding what goes in the blockchain. Now, that's a very, very, very important role. It's part of mining, but all of the Bitcoin miners around the world, pretty much all of them, have nothing to do with block template construction for years now. So that's something that's needed to be fixed. If you look at the pie chart that you'll see on Mempool Space, you'll see that around 30% of the blocks are created by Foundry, then another 28% or so by Antpool, then a bunch of smaller pools, but a lot of them are really just window dressing for Antpool. That's been established in a bunch of research. And what does all that mean? It really just means one thing. It means there's around 4 or 5 entities in the world that are deciding what goes in the blockchain. That's centralized. And whether or not the ramifications of that have reared their ugly head yet is kind of irrelevant. We don't really want to wait for that to become the problem that it could be before we fix it. Because if it starts becoming a problem and then we try to fix it, we're going to meet a lot more resistance than if we take a prophylactic attitude and say, let's try and fix this thing before it becomes a problem, before people start exploiting it and benefiting from Bitcoin's centralization. Let's nip it in the bud. Let's make it so that miners decide themselves what goes in the blockchain again, because mining is actually quite decentralized, the hashing part of it. So you need to expand the role of what miners do to also deciding what goes in the blockchain and diminish the role of what pools do. Pools should just be a way for miners to solve cash flow and get consistent income. They shouldn't be the ones deciding what goes in the blockchain because you can only really have a few pools. You can't have thousands of pools because then there is no pool. It's just everyone is solo mining again. So that is the raison d'etre for Ocean. That is why we do what we do. We need to decentralize what it is that ends up in the blockchain or the decisions to that effect.
Real fast for the listener, imagine there being, and I'm going to use really generic numbers here to make it really simple. Let's say there's 1,000 transactions that are wanting to get into the next block, but there's only enough space for 100. There has to be someone or something that says out of those 1,000 transactions, these are the 100 that are going to be included in the next block. They're often the ones that are paying the highest fee to get into the next block. But if you only have 3 to 5 people that are making this decision as to what the next 100 transactions are, that becomes a concern. And everybody knows there's all these mining rigs in the world, and some are being operated by an individual person. Some are being operated by large companies and publicly traded businesses. But when you think about it, if I'm running my own rig and I find the block, you would think that I would have the capacity or the prerogative or the rights to basically say, no, these are the 100 transactions that I'm going to include out of these 1,000 in this block that my rig just found. That's not how it works today. Thanks to Ocean, who has highlighted this importance of a block template, which is the 100 that we're selecting that would go into the next block. This is all starting to change. And so that first conversation that Mechanic and I had gets into a lot of detail and a lot of background on this. Jason, I'm curious if you have any additional comments on this that you think are noteworthy before we kind of really dig into your protocol that you wrote.
Yeah, I mean, Mechanic pretty much summed up the issue pretty well. And I'm sure you guys went into detail in your other episode that I admittedly had not seen. If you go back to the beginning of where things started, I mean, mining was completely decentralized. You had the people mining were running nodes and making blocks directly off of their own nodes, and there were no pools. So that was as decentralized as it could get. And then we kind of moved towards pools. So our arc of centralization has kind of gone up and is hopefully at its peak now, with Ocean going to bring it back down.
I'll add to that as well. Everyone was CPU mining, and everyone has a CPU. Then as we moved into ASIC territory, which is making computers specific to Bitcoin mining, we had some centralization around that as well, because, semiconductor manufacturing is basically, 2 companies or 2 locations in the world that really do it, right?
Okay, let's talk about Stratum, and let's start with Stratum V1. What is this? Because people hear this terminology and they've probably heard Stratum V2 more than Stratum V1. But talk to us about what V1 is. Then let's get into the conversation of V2. But start us off. What is this, and why does a person even need to know what it is?
I guess I'll take that. So there has to be a way for the hardware that's actually doing the hashing to know what it should hash. So in the beginning, we had built into the Bitcoin node itself was a mechanism called get work. And it would give the miner a block header to hash, and all it could spin were the last 32 bits was the nonce. So that gives it about 4 billion hashes before it has to request more work from the node. That was not super scalable, because as ASICs were able to do that amount of work in milliseconds, and even FPGAs and GPUs, that wasn't super scalable. Back when I ran Elegius, when we were still doing get work, before Stratum V1 really took off, I mean, that pool was handling tens of thousands, if not 100,000 requests per second for work. It was getting out of hand. So what Stratum V1 did was a way to expand on get work and let the miner itself, the hardware and the software that runs on that hardware, figure out more work for it to do that was useful for the pool. And so instead of just being able to spin the nonce part of the header, it was also able to construct the Coinbase transaction, the generation transaction, and modify the Coinbase portion of it to add additional entropy. And so that was what Stratum V1 was designed to do, was just to make it so that the miner didn't have to contact the pool as often. So now we're sending work every 30 seconds or so to the miner, and they're able to work on that until the pool says otherwise. Mm-hmm. And that was a bit of a change versus these many requests per second that were needed from each miner. It was just a way to make that process more efficient. Okay. But it's still completely centralized on whoever is generating the work at the pool side.
Got it. So then V2 comes out, and my understanding was that this was a fix to some type of encryption or to make that process more efficient. But then it's kind of morphed into this decentralized template construction in addition to making the encryption more efficient. Talk us through what initially was intended with Stratum V2 and kind of where it was at, and why you guys have kind of gone off in your own direction as Stratum V2 is still kind of in works in a very decentralized way with respect to the programmers that are working on it.
So Stratum V1, as I mentioned, was designed as a centralized protocol. There's a centralized entity that is generating the work that the miner will do. It's just a way to get the miner to be able to work on it for longer without having to contact that same entity again for more work. It's not the most efficient protocol. It's in plain text. It's unencrypted. So when we're sending things that are relevant to Bitcoin that are, let's say, binary data for the Coinbase, that's not super efficient to double up on those bytes and send it in ASCII as hex. So it's kind of silly. So immediately after Stratum V1 was released, there were proposals to do other protocols that were more efficient on the bandwidth side and converting some of that into binary. And that wasn't initially called Stratum V2, but eventually morphed into Stratum V2 just to get that efficiency gain of being able to add a layer of encryption, because you can do security over a binary connection. You can do that over Stratum V1 as well, but no one really implemented it. And then Stratum V2 was supposed to solve that efficiency issue and add a couple extensions and things like that. Eventually, it morphed into having a way to do your own changes to the block template on the pool side. And then eventually, pretty recently, being able to construct your own full template on the miner side and negotiate that with the pool. The issue with that is that it's still a centralized protocol. Those aspects of Stratum V2 where the miner is in control of the template are not required. And as far as I know today, are not implemented by any pool.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I think, one pool that implements the centralized aspects of Stratum V2, but that's kind of predicated on the miner having changes to support Stratum V2, which Stratum V1 for the centralized aspects of it works just fine. It's not, we don't necessarily need to go to all these vendors and be like, we need you to support Stratum V2. So if you want to do template creation even with Stratum V2, you need something external that's doing that template creation anyway. So your miner is going to have to communicate with that, which then communicates with the pool, and then you're mining your template. So since that was the case, we already have Stratum V1. At the time that we started working on Datum, there wasn't a clear path to being able to do pure decentralized templates. So we just decided to just do our own thing and just make it happen. So Datum is completely decentralized. The pool provides no work to the miner whatsoever. The miner has to generate all their work, has to have their own template. And if they don't have that, they don't have any work to do. So it's kind of the opposite of what you would see from a centralized protocol.
Let me put this in the plain text for everybody. So V2 started morphing. It got a little bit more cumbersome. It looked like it was going to take a pretty long time for decentralized template construction to really take place. Jason is a man of action. He has extreme technical chops to just say, you know what, I'm just going to kind of code up my own protocol, and then did it in 8 months is what I'm hearing for the Datum protocol. Is that correct?
Probably less than that overall, because we had a lot of other projects going on. But yes, I mean, it was conceived of and is going to be in beta in about 8 months. Yes.
Mechanic, take it away. What else am I missing here with the plain text version of what Jason just said?
No, it's as remarkable as you present it. Like SV2, Stratum V2 has been the fix for mining centralization. When did BetaHash come around? Was it like 2011?
It's been a while.
I think it's 12 or 13 years we've been waiting for Stratum V2 to come along and do this. Ocean started. We didn't start with Datum at the beginning. We were busy doing other stuff. Jason has basically done it. I'm running it. I'm going to show you what it looks like in a minute. And I'm mining my own templates now on a pool. We've done it in a couple of months. It's really lightweight as well, which is nice. Unfortunately, there's quite a big, running a node is a bit more hungry than we'd like these days. We fought a war over keeping it easy to run nodes and keeping the requirements low. That's really the heavy lifting any hardware you have has to do when it comes to implementing this in your own mining setup. Running Datum on top of your node is, if the node was nothing, you could just run Datum on like a Raspberry Pi 3 or something. Like we're talking like a $15 computer you could use for running this thing. But as I say, it needs a node, and the nodes are quite hungry now.
I want to pause real fast. Here's the thing. Listeners love a great story. And I think we have a huge opportunity to tell a great story here. That is a bit of a tangent, but it also highlights, Jason is such a gifted programmer, such a gifted developer. We got to tell this story. You and I tell this story. As long as he's not going to be too embarrassed, we're going to.
No, you're fine. It's not the first time.
Yeah.
So, Mechanic, tell the story about Jason and Tesla, just to give the listeners a little taste of like who we're dealing with here on the show today.
So let's start by celebrating Jason a little bit. Anyone that watched the Ocean launch will know this story anyway. Jason ran one of the biggest pools, and arguably the first, at least identifiable pool in Bitcoin. That was Eligius, or Ocean V1, as I often like to look at it. And this was sitting on servers in Jason's house, right? And it had like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins have flown through that pool. Something like 16% of all the Bitcoins there are have gone through blocks that mined that pool. Is that right?
I don't know if that's the right number, but it's a lot.
Close.
It's a pretty high number.
It was giant back in the day. Like it was the pool I used, and I didn't know Luke and Jason back then. It was the obvious choice. It was 0%. It was transparent. None of the other pools were. But anyway, Luke went away and started doing more core development, and Jason got into hacking Teslas and did really well at it and discovered a critical flaw in them. Realized he could control any Tesla in the world from his terminal, and phoned up the tech support on a Friday night and just asked the guy, are you near a Model S right now? And I presume you asked him if there was like 6 feet of room in front of it so you could demonstrate the fact that you were able to drive it forward a bit from your laptop. And I think that's how it went down. And a few days later, you're on the phone with Elon Musk. And that's how we got Luke unbanned from Twitter, funnily enough, because of that personal relationship.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really been mentioned much, but yeah, I had to make a call.
So,
which is a whole nother, situation. Real fast, but Jason, what in the world made you want to start trying to crack a Tesla? Just for the sheer challenge or what? Like,
to be honest, I don't really know. I had bought a Model S back in 2014, 2013 or something like that. And it's basically just a computer on wheels with some motors and things. So I wanted to do some things with the infotainment and kind of make some tweaks of my own. I mean, it turned out to be basically just a Linux computer. And one thing led to another. Tesla has a security researcher program and a bug bounty program. So I had joined that when I had found some like really small things initially when I was getting into the infotainment system. And one thing led to another, and I find this bug chain that basically lets me control any Tesla in the world. And so I basically asked him for a VIN. This is the head of security research at Tesla at the time. He gave me the VIN, gave me about 10 seconds, and I had that thing fired up and moving. And he was just like, I got to make some call. So yeah, that was, that's always a fun story.
We could jive on that, I think, for the rest of the show. But let's stay focused here. So this is who we're dealing with, folks. This is the guy that wrote the new Datum Protocol, which is, I shouldn't say this, but effectively it's almost like forking Stratum V2 to kind of push forward this idea of decentralized templates so that if you mine a block, if you're running your rig and you want to say, this is what the block template should look like, these are the 100 transactions I want out of the 1,000. These are the ones that are going to be included. And Ocean is going live with this. We're recording this prior to their launch, but by the time this airs, it is going to be actively launched. So walk us through what's happening in the background. How did you think about this? Very simply for the audience, how did you think about the construction of this to basically enable this type of a capability for the user?
So first off, you need a pool that's conducive to this in the first place. So there aren't other pools out there that support Datum yet, which is to be expected, but they're also not about to support Stratum V2 either. Not in that capacity, right? Jason already mentioned one of the pools that allows you to at least have encrypted communication between the miner and the pool, but it's still all centralized and you're still only doing work that the pool tells you should do. What we're doing with Ocean, we've made it work on the back end in a compatible manner for miners that want to run the Datum protocol and make their own work locally. And all they do when it comes to Ocean is they reach out to us asking what the split is, which is the one legitimate purpose of a pool to exist. You want to solve for cash flow. So rather than I solve a block every 12 months, I collaborate with 12 other people doing the same, and I get to have a 12th of that every 1 month. So it works out at the same amount of money, but it means that you have way better cash flow, right? That's a crude example, but that is the function of a pool. That doesn't mean that the pool's supposed to sit there and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to tell you what goes in the blockchain and what doesn't. That is an overstepping of a boundary, and it leaves us wide open to regulatory capture and censorship and all these awful things. So Ocean is conducive to that. Obviously, having invented Datum, we've implemented it on our back end. As of now, there are no other Datum supporting pools. Some may spring up, and that would be great. And yeah, the ramifications of that are enormous. You have to design it in that particular way, but the fact that we have means our miners are going to be running their own nodes, making their own blocks. They reach out to Ocean to know what the correct split is. If and when they find blocks, it's their name that goes up there for everyone to see, not Ocean's. And importantly, they broadcast the block to the network themselves directly. They don't need to send it to us and then we tell the world what it was.
Oh, that's
We're just cutting out the middleman in every single place we can. All Ocean wants to do is say, that guy did 20% of the work and that guy did 80% of the work. Here's the split. Use that and your shares are all valid on the pool. If you don't want to use that, you're solo mining. But either way, you're mining and you're in control of what you're doing.
This is the first challenge that I'm thinking through. If you're going to go through this from like a game theory incentive standpoint, let's just say that the three of us are operating, we're all providing hash rate, we're all providing our own block template. And let's say I find the block, and let's say I'm a total idiot. And let's say that I fail to even, or I include the worst types of transactions into this that have the lowest fee. And you guys are very frustrated because we're sharing the payout, right? So how do you guard against the person who's submitting a block template that's participating in the pool, but their submission for the template is just idiotic or super low fee when there was an opportunity to have way higher fees in there? How do you handle that when you're writing this Datum protocol?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually been a question that's come up a lot. So one of the things that people have asked, like, what happens if somebody mines empty blocks, or if I mine this low fee blocks? And that's what I want to do. Famously, Luke likes 300 kilobyte blocks, which obviously aren't going to include as many transactions, but he's going to be able to mine those with his hardware on Ocean. So we had to come up with a way to make it so that the other miners didn't have to subsidize that behavior by taking a lower reward. So the reward system on the back end treats the shares submitted by people using Datum, so they're going to be rewarded as if they had solo mined that same block. If they had mined 20% of that block, they get 20% of that block. So if you extend that out for a long period of time, it will be as if that same person had been solo mining that same type of block. So if you mine empty blocks forever and you're expected to find one a year, within a year you will find you will get rewarded 3.125 Bitcoin. But everybody else is going to you're going to get a smaller share of everybody else's blocks who are mining higher fees. And it's not going to be determined by us, it's determined by the miners themselves. So there's no central, like, this is what we expect people to mine. Like, no, this is what people are mining and this is what you are mining. So your portion of what they are mining is different than what it would be if you were mining the same thing.
Yeah, so I mean, let's get down to like the philosophical question of it. Is it okay for a pool in our position to be treating one share as different to another, right? And some people, this is going to set off an ideological red flag. Like, why is the pool saying that this guy mining empty blocks, his shares are worth less than the guy mining full blocks? How do you determine what should go in a block? And if you are doing that, isn't it all just a LARP anyway? Shouldn't the pool if the pool is going to have any opinion about what belongs in blocks, why even try and decentralize it? If you're going to nudge miners in any particular direction, I'm just steel manning the inevitable trolls that are going to come after us for this. Unfortunately, that ideology is not realistic in a pooled scenario because it leaves the pool wide open to attack. We're a tiny pool. Right now, Bitmain, if they wanted to, could come along and destroy us in 5 minutes by mining completely empty blocks with nothing in them whatsoever. And supposing they come and do that and they're 50% of the pool with their attack, which is like, a rounding error for them, they can come and do that, mine blocks that have no transactions in them, that don't even claim the subsidy, right? They don't even claim 3.125 Bitcoin. They claim nothing. But they remain entitled to 50% of real blocks found by other people. That would mean every one of our miners is suddenly earning 50% as much. The pool is dead in like hours. It's over. So it's incumbent on us as a pool to make sure that people can't attack the pool by mining really stupid blocks. But everything is going to be done transparently, and it's going to be done for very defensible reasons, right? So there is just no other option. And it comes down to, if you really, really want to do something unique that Ocean doesn't like, you can always just solo mine at the end of the day. That's at the end of the day, if you want complete and utter sovereignty, then you have to solo mine. If you want to split rewards with other people, you're going to have to play ball to some extent. But as I said, the transparency should make it palatable for everyone. And it's just the real world calling, right? If we want to decentralize Bitcoin mining, the naive person is just going to say everyone needs to solo mine. But we know that isn't possible. It's not going to happen. There's always going to be central points of failure. The point is that those central points of failure do as little as possible. Having some sort of reward mechanism that does what Jason said, that is somewhat reflective of what people are doing with their blocks, is an important part of it. And I will just round off by saying that transaction fees are the difference between a miner that mines transaction fees and one that doesn't is between 1% and 2% of what comes in blocking. Well, 99% of what miners are earning comes from subsidy at the moment, and around 1% comes from transaction fee revenue, which is, so when people obviously podcast number 1 that me and you did was mostly about the content of Ocean's centralized templates, which is, are we putting spam in there or not? How much op return data are we allowing or not? And it's just, when you look at the actual numbers, even for enormous miners with hundreds of petahash, you're looking at the difference in revenue of us excluding some op returns, and it comes out to $8 a week or something for someone that's spending $200,000 on electricity a week. And it's it's so irrelevant. Transaction fees are so irrelevant at the moment. We know they're relevant in the future, but while you're still getting 3.125 Bitcoins coming out of the chain with new coins every 10 minutes, a couple, $400 in transaction fee revenue or, $1,000 it's just nothing by comparison. So these things may need to be tweaked in the future. We may need some new ideas, but we've got, in 2030, I might start worrying about these things. Or 2032 rather, because that'll be another halving. I think stuff like this starts to become complicated then. For now, transaction fee revenue is it's almost irrelevant.
Let me try to explain what I think is happening here, and you guys correct me if this description's wrong. But let's use an extreme example. Let's say, Jason, let's say that the block template that you're submitting has 0 fees. You're basically including the worst transactions and has the lowest fee each time. Let's say the Ocean just found a block. The 3 of us bring our hashing online, and we're not going to find another block for 2 weeks from now. Okay. And so each time we're submitting this, our template, Jason, you're submitting the worst fees that you could find out of the transactions that are in the mempool. Mechanic, let's say that you're finding about middle of the road, and then let's say that I'm always submitting the highest fee transactions into my block template. So the 3 of us are kind of all at odds with each other, and we do this for a week straight, and then all of a sudden the block is found. And let's say that I found the block and I was submitting the highest fee transactions in there. Are we all paid equally in that block that was just found based off of that history of the templates that we were constantly submitting for an entire week? Or are we paid out slightly differently based off of that history of the templates that we were submitting for the week prior?
So the way the Ocean's reward system works is very similar to PPLNS. So we call it tides. We look back at the last 8 blocks worth of work to determine what kind of split people get. So it's not necessarily 50% of the work for the last block, but it's 50% of the work for the last 8. So there's a smoothing effect there, and that's part of the job of a pool, is to iron out variance. So we smooth that over 8 network blocks worth of work, which is great. Now, as far as the differing rewards and transaction fees, that's a little different. So what ends up happening is we assign a weight to the actual shares that are submitted based on what your template would bring in for everyone. And because of the way it works, if you extrapolate the way that it's weighted out in the long term, and let's say you're mining, let's just, for round numbers, we'll say you're mining blocks that bring in 5 Bitcoin. So if you're expected to find 1 block a year, within a year, you would expect to earn from Ocean 5 Bitcoin because that's what you're mining. If you're mining continuously a 5 Bitcoin block all the time and you're 1 a year, you should get 5 Bitcoin. Now, Mechanic, might be mining 4.5 Bitcoin blocks. these are outrageous numbers, but
it illustrates
Yeah.
he's including different transactions that have lower fees.
Right.
That's why
Yep.
84.5. Okay.
Yeah.
so the split looks a little odd because you're not necessarily getting the exact proportion of mechanics block that you would expect, or he's not getting the exact proportion of yours that you would expect for the fee difference. But the way it works out long term is that you are getting what you are mining based on your own template, as if you were solo mining that template with the pool in mind. I hope that makes sense.
So
It's hard to explain.
let's use real world examples, right? So
Okay.
supposing you're a Bitcoin exchange and you have a reasonably sized on-chain footprint, right? You have, 1,000 people doing withdrawals every day. You batch them up, but you're still doing like 50 transactions every day. And you know that you're going to have that blockchain footprint no matter what. And you're mining as well. I can think of examples of companies that actually work exactly like this. They're going to put those transactions in their own blocks, assuming that they're finding blocks, if they're finding like a couple of blocks a week, this might make sense for them to do. And why pay any transaction fee at all? They can just put them in for 0 sats a byte. They can do that. And if they're going to find a block with it, they might as well do it. The point is that shouldn't be, there was not an opportunity cost, an actual financial cost to doing that, because they could have put in transactions that paid more in any scenario where there are more
Right.
transactions out there for them to put in, which is, 24 hours a day. There's never blocks that are lacking transactions at the moment. There's always enough to go around to fill up the block space. So the whole point is that is not on every other miner on the pool to subsidize the fact that you're not going to use the block space for some lucrative transactions. So you can do it as an exchange. You can start putting your transactions in the block, and you'll get slightly less because your shares are reflective of the fact that you're trying to mine blocks that wouldn't be quite as lucrative for everyone on the pool. And the people that aren't doing that are just, dumb profit maximizing algo miners that just start from the top down, and whatever's most lucrative, that's where we start. And we go down from there until the block is full, and we update every few seconds. Those miners are going to absolutely max out what they can get per share. And that's the real world example of it.
I love that. I think that's fair.
I think that exactly.
Fantastic.
That's the idea. It has to be fair, because we don't want you paying for something that someone else is doing, and I don't want to pay for something that you're doing.
Yeah, it's the only way to run a pool, I think. I think if you want to go laissez-faire with it, which is just let anyone mine any block that can do anything they want and treat all shares as equal, as I said, that opens us up to attack immediately. You could just start mining deliberately nasty blocks. And because of Ocean's size being so small, you don't need, with a couple of exahash for a couple of days, you can ruin the pool. And we can't let that happen. We owe it to our miners not to let that happen. And because we're permissionless, we could never stop it on any other level, right? If centralized pools that required KYC and all that stuff wanted to do what we're doing with templates, they could more aggressively reject people that were doing silly stuff like that and say, right, we know exactly who you are, because we have, your government ID, your credentials, all that stuff. We assign specific IPs to your facilities, and you're only allowed to connect if we have the right credentials and all that stuff. If you want to troll us, we'll just kick you off the pool. But Ocean's permissionless. So we have to find other ways in which we can say, hey, everyone is forced to be sensible. And that's the only way we can maintain the ethos of the whole thing.
It's interesting. Since you guys launched, I've talked to 2 different people that mine using the Ocean pool, and both of them, and this was not at the same time, these were 2 different conversations in 2 different locations at 2 different times. Both of them swore to me that they make more money on the Ocean pool than they had with any other pool. And I say this because I think an outsider who's only kind of observed and seen what Ocean is doing, especially with the templates that they can, I think there's 3 templates that they can choose from, appear to have less fees than other pools that are just maximizing for the highest paying transaction. So how is that possible? What's happening in the background that this outside observer is totally missing? I'm assuming these people are very trustworthy individuals that are providing, in my opinion, quite a bit of hash rate. How is this possible? Explain this to the listener who hears this and they're shaking their head like, come on, there's no way.
Yeah, I think like incredulity is natural, but certainly our miners have been making more. And there's a very, very obvious and intuitive reason for that is that we cut out a middleman. That's all. So my analogy for it is, supposing you're like, you can plant crops yourself and farm them, and you might have a good year or a bad year. Like you get, 800 tons of apples one year, and then next year it sucks for whatever reason, the weather was bad. If you can't deal with the fact that there's variety there, some years are good, some years are bad, you pay someone else to go and farm on your behalf, and they guarantee you a set amount of apples every year. They're going to make a very low guarantee because they don't want to be on the hook for stuff that simply doesn't exist. So in the Bitcoin mining world, with Ocean, miners have to deal with variance, right? Some blocks might have no transaction fees in them. Some blocks might have millions of dollars of transaction fees in them. We don't know. We don't make any guarantees to that effect. What we do say is that if you're 50% of the pool, you get 50% of what comes out of the chain. That's it. We don't even touch it. The minute that money exists, it's already yours, and you can't even mine unless you're using a Bitcoin address. So we won't even let you mine with us unless we have a way to give you your money, or when the money gets created, it gets created on your address, not anything to do with us. None of the other pools operate this way anymore, with a couple of very small exceptions. Everyone else has opted for that model I was talking about, where someone goes away and says, don't worry about farming. I'll go and I'll plant all the trees. I'll deal with the weather sucking some years. I'll deal with the fact that a volcano erupted and made there be no sunshine one summer or something like that. I'll guarantee you apples. If they do that, that is a type of insurance product. That is an extremely expensive product to offer for people. It's great because if you're selling apples and you know exactly how many you're going to get, that's pretty nice to run a business that way. But it means you're getting a lot less apples because no one is going to put themselves in a position where they give you everything you could possibly have gotten by yourself taking on the variance. Someone's got to deal with the variance of the blockchain, and it's unpredictable. We don't know how many Bitcoins are going to be created over any one time period.
One of the most common questions I get asked from family and friends is, Preston, where do you personally buy your Bitcoin from? And the answer is really simple. I buy it on river.com. Not only can you easily buy Bitcoin with zero fees on recurring orders, you can have peace of mind knowing Bitcoin on River is held one-to-one in multi-sig cold storage, all while being fully licensed and regulated in the United States. Plus, their relationship managers are US-based and available by phone for you or your business. Additionally, River has built their own infrastructure from the ground up, which means they don't rely on third parties to function like other Bitcoin exchanges. River also just created a new feature not found anywhere else called River Link. It allows you to send Bitcoin over a text message to easily orange pill your family, pay a friend for dinner, or send a gift. There's a new standard for investing in Bitcoin, and River is setting it. Go to river.com/fundamentals and get up to $100 free when you sign up and buy Bitcoin. That's river.com/fundamentals. Holding Bitcoin is the best way to protect your family from the threat of fiat currency collapse. And few people understand this better than Tony Yazbek, cybersecurity expert and founder of the Bitcoin Way. Tony was in Lebanon when the currency imploded. He's seen the chaos that erupts when the ATMs stop working and the bank accounts get frozen. He knows what it's like to lose everything. But with his cybersecurity expertise and by fully adopting Bitcoin, Tony was able to engineer his escape. And now Tony and the Bitcoin Way team work to make sure this never happens to you. With over 25 years of experience, their expert training empowers you to self-custody your family's Bitcoin the right way, secure your devices and protect your privacy, develop robust inheritance plans, and secure for Plan B citizenship. The Bitcoin Way can transform you into a sovereign individual. You just need to take the first step. Schedule a free consultation today at thebitcoinway.com/TIP.
And every single miner, pretty much, or I'd say around 98 to 99% of miners on the network at the moment are out there saying, I don't want to deal with variance. I just want to get paid a consistent amount so I don't have to think about it. And the middlemen that have sprung up to, create a business to that effect are taking a massive cut for themselves because they have to. Otherwise, they'll immediately go bankrupt because of how unpredictable the blockchain is. So with Ocean, it takes the opposite approach. It just says, miners, we don't want to be a middleman. Come along, come and deal with the variance. You might have 3 days that suck. You might have one day where you earn 8 times what you expected. You don't know. But the point is, at the end of the day, you're going to get more revenue if you can handle it. So it's the low time preference pool. It's the pool that says if you're not worried about the next 24 hours, but you want to have a better month than you would have anywhere else, come and mine on Ocean. But the flip side of that is if you cannot wait an entire month, if you're into Clown World fiat games and you need everything to work out over a 24-hour period and you need all of the right paperwork and all that stuff, and you don't want to deal with the nasty cypherpunk blockchain and all that stuff, if you want to just rent your hash rate to someone that'll give you a fixed amount for it, you can do it. But obviously, you're not going to get the same revenue. So it should be pretty intuitive, right? And it's funny because the irony is we had, functional spam filtration when we launched with our centralized template. And everyone was like, well, that's open and shut case. There's going to be less money for the miners mining on Ocean. And then every single report came out and said, no, I'm earning more. So why is that? And it wasn't just that, right? We had a bunch of other factors. We got unlucky with our blocks. We got unlucky in times of historically high fees. So we got unlucky during December 2023, and we got unlucky during the halving, not finding a single block. We found 3 empty blocks, which was insane because for some reason Ocean likes to find blocks 8 seconds after the last network block, which is when they're very likely to be empty. We've been,
but you still got the block reward. It wasn't like there was no block reward, correct?
Sure, but I mean,
yeah, that's important for people to know, though.
You have these compounding factors that meant Ocean should at least have been paying out the same as other pools or slightly worse, but it wasn't. It was coming in above 10% better than all the others, and everyone's like, how can this be? Ocean charges 0% fees, the other pool charges 2%, and I got 16% more mining on Ocean. That doesn't make any sense to me. They've been unlucky, all these things. And it was just because, hey, it's very simple. The other pools, the fee they charge you does not mean you're split from the blockchain minus 2%. That's not what that means. Ocean is giving you a direct split from the blockchain. Other pools are giving you an FPPS calculated rate minus 2%. Now, the FPPS calculated rate doesn't match up with what comes out of the blockchain. And when you dig deep, you realize that no one could afford to run an FPPS pool anyway, unless they have enough provisos and quid pro quos and, terms and conditions and all that stuff that could mean, hey, if I go on an unlucky streak, I'm not bankrupt in 24 hours. I can still run my pool. So they have to take a big cut to do that. And the point is, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because Bitcoin's fee revenue gets less and less predictable versus subsidy. Every halving, it becomes harder and harder and harder for miners to predict what they're going to bring in from the chain. So FPPS is basically a dying model. Ocean comes around at the same time. The whole concept of what we wanted to do was decentralized templates. But then the payout system started to become one of the most important things about what we're doing, because we're looking at FPPS. We're saying miners have all gone for the centralized option of, I want guaranteed income. I don't care about overall revenue. I don't care about having any sovereignty in this. I just want consistent income. And then a bunch of companies come around that say, we can provide that for you. We will be the most insanely large middleman. We will take an enormous commission that won't be included in the percentage we charge you. It will be a separate kind of commission, like those airports that say, 0% currency conversion commission. And it's nowhere near market rate. You're off by like 15%, but it says 0%, right? It's just not included in that. So I think everyone agrees. Like, we've got some friends that work for FPPS pools that are like, yeah, this is over. We can't maintain this. Like the cut we have to take to be able to weather any unlucky storm is just so big that it's eating into miners' revenue too much. We hate doing it. Miners are losing loads of money doing it too. It's over. So the fact that Ocean came around to decentralized templates at the time that the dominant payout method would also be kind of dying is a sort of, it's kind of poetic that happened, because we're saying, look, you guys, you've gotten used to the free lunch and it isn't a real thing and it's not sustainable. No one is going to say, hey, I'll pay you 50% of what comes out of the chain if you're 50% of my pool. And I'll do that no matter what happens, even if I go unlucky and don't find any blocks. No one's going to do that. It's Bitcoin. No one's able to print this stuff and say, don't worry, miners, we'll just bail you out, right? If you get in over your head, it's Bitcoin. That's the whole point, is that you can't play those kinds of games.
Just for folks that are listening, the term FPPS stands for full pay per share. This is a common term in the mining space for how the reward is paid out to everybody inside of the pool. I have heard, and I can't remember the explanation that I had heard from somebody as to why Ocean is struggling to get large mining, publicly traded companies to start participating on the pool. Help the listener understand why or what type of roadblocks you guys are running into and what effectively needs to be solved for the bigger, the ones that are providing large amounts of hash rate to start utilizing the pool.
I mean, there's not a whole lot on the technical side. I mean, on the technical side, it works just like any other pool currently. With decentralized templates, we're trying to keep that inertia low as well. A lot of it seems to be some regulatory stuff that's not even really regulatory, like SOC 2 compliance and things like that.
That's what I had heard. What is that? Yeah, help me understand.
My understanding of it, and I'm not an expert here, is it's kind of a framework for auditing how a company does things internally, to make sure there's processes for onboarding and offboarding, for example, and to monitor what employees do, and all of this framework that you have to kind of fit into in order to get this piece of paper that says I'm compliant. And a lot of these companies look for that, even though, in my opinion, that piece of paper is not really good for anything. It just says that we jump through these hoops. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean you're secure. Doesn't necessarily mean you have a product that's worth using. It just means we jumped through these accounting hoops. And from looking at that, we actually looked at trying to do that because that's been requested by some of the larger entities that are like, we like what you're doing and we want to jump on board, but we need this checkbox. And it's not been an easy thing because for us, what we're doing is so far outside of these boxes that they put this compliance stuff in that it doesn't work very well. I think we'll be able to pull it off as a company. I think we'll be able to do the SOC 2 stuff, but it's not super easy because we're permissionless. We're non-custodial. Like we don't have the information that some of these audits really want. And frankly, some of the things that they want to audit do make some of the processes less secure. And we want to be secure. We don't want people to be able to get into things in Ocean and cause problems for our customers. And I like to think that we do a very good job on that. And by going through these processes and having to change some of that to fit molds, we're now creating a larger attack surface for things. If everybody has to do something one way, we run into the problem is like, well, all the attackers only have to find one way in. And it kind of ends up being like the recent thing with CloudStrike. All of these companies use this one compliance related software in order to check that box, and look what it did.
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those. And I think we need a better route. And I think a lot of it is these companies need to stop requiring everybody fit into this box, which that's a longer term change.
The irony is that it's a security thing that they basically want you to have data that then can be audited. And you're saying, hold on, we're going point to point here. We're not collecting the data by design.
Exactly.
So that it's more secure. So that it's more
secure. And they're like, well, you got to collect it so that we know you're doing it securely. And we're like, it's definitely more secure to not have it in the first place. Government bureaucrat, I don't understand. Sorry. You just need to get this. And like,
that's
we
wild.
made that joke about them saying like, we want to look at your private keys to make sure they're securely generated. Like just, the government bureaucrat's idea of what like a secure computing process is just painful. And it was a pretty nice vindicating moment when CrowdStrike happened. And we're like, yeah, we're not going to have that. And it is a SOC 2 compliant thing is CrowdStrike. Like that is one of the ways the box ticked. And we're like, demonstrably, this stuff is not good. So, to go back to the question you originally asked, the first exahash is the hardest, and we got that. And then we got the second exahash, which came a lot easier. We're below that at the moment, but that's just, it goes up and down. But we're getting there. And the bigger we get, the easier it is for other people to join because the lower our variance gets. The trade-off with Ocean, just so I can fairly present everything and not just pretend we're the magic fix for everything, is you have to deal with variance when you mine on Ocean. And for some people, they just can't deal with that. I do know miners that have to pay power bills every 24 hours, and Ocean will definitely go 24 hours without a block and does so between most of its blocks. So that's not viable. However, if we gained another 50 exahash tomorrow, then it would be viable. And the more hash rate you get, the more easy it is for other hash rate to come on. So trying to get the party started is incredibly difficult. But once it's there and there's loud music blaring and lights flashing all over the neighborhood, other people do just start showing up, right? No one wants to be the only guy at a party. So it's very much just like that. Do you want me to show you a Datum client running?
Yes, definitely. Let's see that.
All right, let me share my screen. And
For people that are curious, SOC 2 stands for Service Organization Control 2. I don't know. It's government stuff.
Well, while they're doing that, one of the things about SOC 2 is like their big thing is protecting customer data. And I just find it quite ironic that it's something that people want of us when we have no customer data. So just throwing that out there.
so yeah, you can see my terminal screen here, right?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a Bitcoin node up top doing what Bitcoin nodes always do. This was the last block we found, block 862.560. But you can see all these create new blocks. That's the Datum server reaching out and saying, can you create, oh, we just found a new block. And then immediately Datum said, I need a new block template. And that happened in 90 milliseconds or something insanely quick like that. Down here is the Datum server. So you can see I've got a little Avalon in my bedroom, keeping it warm. That's the one Stratum client that's connected to my Datum server. That's doing work I created using my node. And the Datum server also reaches out to Ocean and says, I need the Coinbase split to include in these blocks I'm creating. And Ocean provides that. And what that means is I'm essentially solo mining, except I'm going to get reward splits on Ocean, because all of the proofs of work I do here, I submit back to my Datum server, and then that gets submitted back to Ocean. And Ocean says, yep, these are all valid, and these all have the correct split. So you're entitled to a split of what happens with every other block on Ocean. So this is the dream. This is how pooled mining should actually work. And it does. I'm actually doing it now. And that's it. So it's super lightweight. You can just run this on top of a Bitcoin node. There's a tiny bit of configuration that needs to be done, but it is very, very simple. And I even have it packaged up for Start 9, if anyone knows Start OS, which is one of the node solutions that people have where you can just run your own home server. Company I used to work at. And it's all pre-configured there. So it's really easy. You just install Datum and it sits on top of the Bitcoin node. It configures itself to work with it. And then you just point your miners at it. You get the IP address of the server, you get the port of the service, and that's it. Then your miners are all mining your own locally made work. And you don't even need to change any of the usernames or anything if you were already on Ocean before. It all just works and goes straight through. And if and when you find a block, you get to stamp your name on it. That's the secondary Coinbase field. And you can write whatever you want. You can mine blocks that say Preston Pysh, and then you still get cash flow all year. But when you eventually get lucky and find that block after a year or 3 years or however many years it takes you to find a block with whatever hash rate you have, suddenly that's your name up there and it's a bunch of transactions you wanted. That can be a Lightning channel open, right? That you wanted to pay 1 sat per byte for, that was 10 million sats in size, and you can use it for years. It cost you nothing to open it, right? And you waited around, you were happy to be patient. That's what we're building here. And well, I should say that's what's been built. It works at the time of this recording, which is 23rd of September, but this thing's probably going to be uploaded in a couple of weeks. And by that point, if we're lucky, someone will have already found a block on Ocean that was made locally with their name on it. And at that point, we've done what Bitcoin needs, which is if someone comes to a mining pool like Ocean and says, you have to be OFAC compliant, or you have to observe this blacklist of transactions, we get to say, we have no control over that. You need to go and find the miner that did it. Here's his Bitcoin address. Good luck. That's what Bitcoin needs, and that's what we've built.
Yeah, and I love that last comment, because that is truly what keeps Bitcoin decentralized and operating its core mission, which is free and open, decentralized money, where nobody has to ask for permission and no government can stop it. Guys, this is mind-blowing. Jason, huge kudos to you, sir, and your contribution here. Mechanic, bravo, sir. I love the fact that you're running this already. How exciting. Again, in the show notes, we'll have the link to our first conversation, which goes into a lot more detail on just like block templates and why they're important and whatnot. Anything else that you guys want to highlight? I know the Ocean website is ocean.xyz. If people want to look at that, look at the hash rate, there's all sorts of really cool metrics. You guys, Jason, are you active on Twitter? I know Mechanic is.
Yeah, I am. I'm WK057 on Twitter.
Okay. All right. We'll have a link to your Twitter profile in the show notes. And anything else that you guys want to highlight?
Yeah, I guess the big thing is we're trying to move from something that miners are very comfortable with, which is just setting up their machine, pointing it at a pool, and dealing with that. And we're trying to literally put more work on them for the good of the network. That's not necessarily an easy thing. So the inertia has to be low. And I think we've accomplished that with Datum by making it as easy as possible to go from where you already are as a miner, mining on a pool in a centralized capacity, to mining on your own node. I don't think we could make it any simpler than it is now. And I think that was a big important thing about it, because if it was going to be incredibly difficult and incredibly complicated to do this, regardless of how good it is for the ecosystem, there were going to be a limited amount of people doing it. So, and that's a big checkbox that I think we've pulled off.
Yeah, I think it's good to reiterate this. Bitcoin needs some decentralization, and it needs it yesterday, and we need practical solutions for that. And this is what that is.
I love it. If people are operating their own mining rig and they want to participate in this, how can they learn more? Just go to the ocean.xyz website, or what do you guys suggest?
You can just harass us on Twitter. You can come in on Discord. You can do anything you like. Luke is very active on Twitter as well. We're very, very quick with the support. We're on Nostr as well. And, you can carry on watching these podcasts. We're going to hopefully do a few more explaining things once it's up and running. I'm planning Bob Burnett, who you know as well. He wants to do an Old Man Yells episode on Datum as well. And we can get into some more technical aspects maybe.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things we can do. And yeah.
All right. Fantastic, guys. Thank you for your time today. This is mind-blowing stuff that you guys are doing. I'm just sitting here in awe, like looking at everything that you've built. But thank you so much for making time and coming on the show.
No problem.
Thanks
for having us.
Most people are still, you meet them, hello, how you doing? I'm into Bitcoin. Oh, that's all a scam. I know someone that lost loads of money with that. What did the person they know buy? Dogecoin. And you're saying that's nothing to do with Bitcoin, but they don't get it. Now imagine how difficult it's going to be when everyone got rugged on Bitcoin because of tokens on Bitcoin that weren't actual Bitcoins, that was just a BRC20 token mint that happened on the Bitcoin blockchain. How difficult is it going to be explaining the Oracle problem to all these people?